Mugret stood on the auction block in the freezing rain of Charleston, South Carolina. It was January 1862, and the world was tearing itself apart. She was the last one, the last person standing on that wooden platform. Everyone else had been sold hours ago. The crowd had thinned to almost nothing. Only a few men remained, huddled under the awning, waiting to see what would happen to the woman nobody wanted. Mugret was 47 years old, too old to have more children, too thin from years of hard labor. Her hands were scud from field work. Her back bore the marks of whippings that had never fully healed. And her eyes held something that made men uncomfortable. Defiance. The auctioneer, a fat man named Collins, was losing patience. "Come on now, gentlemen, someone's got to take her. I can't keep her here all day. She can cook, clean, work the fields, strong as an ox despite her age." No one moved. Collins wiped the rain from his face. "What am I bid? $50, 40. For God's sake, I'll take 20. Silence. Mugret stood perfectly still. She had been on auction blocks before. 3 times in her life she had been sold like cattle. Each time she had promised herself she would survive. She would endure. She would find a way to be free. But this time felt different. This time she saw something in the eyes of the men below, not just disgust or indifference, fear. They were afraid of her. "Fine," Collins snapped. $10, that's my final offer. $10 for a healthy female. Any takers?" A man stepped forward from the back of the crowd. He was younger than the others, maybe 35, with dark hair and a long coat soaked through with rain. His face was hard to read. Not cruel, but not kind either. Just watching. "I'll take her," he said quietly. Collins looked relieved. "Sold to Mr. Nothing Advance for $10. Congratulations, sir. She's all yours." Mugret felt chains being removed from her ankles, felt rough hands pushing her down the steps. She stumbled but didn't fall. She never fell. Nothing Advance walked up to her. He was tall, close to 6 feet. He looked her directly in the eyes, which was unusual. Most white men never made eye contact with enslaved people. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," Mugret said. Her voice was hoarse from not speaking all day. "Then follow me." He turned and walked toward a wagon at the edge of the square. Mugret followed, her bare feet splashing through cold puddles. She had no shoes, no coat, no possessions at all except the thin dress she wore. The wagon was old but sturdy. Nothing. He'd climbed onto the driver's seat and gestured for Mugret to get in the back. She did, settling among bags of grain and tools. They rode in silence through the rain. Mugret watched the city fade behind them, watched the road turn from cobblestone to dirt, watched the landscape change from buildings to fields. She had no idea where she was going, no idea what kind of man had bought her for the price of a decent pair of boots. But she would survive this, just like she had survived everything else. After 2 hours they arrived at a plantation. It was smaller than the ones Mugret had seen before. The main house was modest, 2 stories, with paint peeling from the shutters. The fields stretched out in every direction, but many of them looked neglected, weeds growing where crops should be. Nothing. He'd stopped the wagon in front of a small cabin. "You'll stay here," he said. He climbed down and pulled open the cabin door. "There's a bed, a fireplace, some blankets. Kitchen is in the main house. You'll work there starting tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock. Mugret looked at the cabin. It was tiny, barely bigger than a storage shed, but it had a door, a real door that closed. "Get some rest," Nothing. He'd said. Then he walked away back toward the main house. Mugret stood in the rain for a long moment. Then she went inside. The cabin was cold and dark. There was a small bed with a thin mattress, a wooden chair, and a fireplace with no wood. Mugret sat on the bed and finally let herself feel the exhaustion. She was so tired, tired of being sold, tired of being owned, tired of pretending she was less than human so that white people would feel comfortable around her. But she couldn't rest yet. She had to understand where she was, who Nothing Vance was, and why nobody else had wanted to buy her. She stood and looked around the cabin more carefully. There was something strange about it. The door had a lock, but the lock was on the inside, not the outside. Most slave quarters were locked from the outside to keep people from escaping. This lock would keep people from getting in. Mugrat tested it. It worked perfectly. Strange. The next morning, Mugrat woke before dawn. She had learned long ago to wake early. It was safer that way, less likely to be punished for laziness. She walked to the main house as the sun rose. The kitchen door was unlocked. She went inside and found a woman already there, cooking breakfast. The woman was black, around 60 years old, with gray hair tied back in a scarf. "You must be the new one," the woman said without turning around. "I'm Ruth. Been cooking here for 30 years. You'll help me with the meals and the cleaning." "Yes, ma'am," Mugrat said quietly. Ruth turned to look at her, really look at her. Her eyes were sharp, taking in everything, the scars, the defiance, the exhaustion. "You can drop the ma'am," Ruth said. "We're not like other places here. Mr. Vance doesn't allow that kind of talk between us. We work together, we respect each other, but we're not playing those games." Mugrat blinked. "What kind of place is this?" "A strange one," Ruth admitted. She turned back to her cooking. "Mr. Vance is different, you'll see. Now come help me with these biscuits. We eat at 6. Mugrat worked beside Ruth for the next hour. The kitchen was clean and well stocked. There were herbs hanging from the ceiling, fresh vegetables in baskets, good knives that were actually sharp. Nothing like the kitchens Mugrat had worked in before. At 6 o'clock, Nothing came in through the back door. He nodded to both women. "Morning, Ruth, Mugrat." "Morning, sir," Ruth said. Nothing sat at the small kitchen table, not the dining room. Ruth served him eggs, biscuits, and coffee. He ate quickly, reading a newspaper. Mugrat stood in the corner, unsure what to do. "Sit down," Nothing said without looking up. "Have some breakfast." Mugrat didn't move. "That wasn't a request," Nothing said. He still wasn't looking at her. "You need to eat. You'll be working hard today. Sit." Slowly, Mugrat pulled out a chair and sat. Ruth placed a plate in front of her. Food, real food, more than Mugrat had eaten in weeks. She picked up her fork and ate slowly, waiting for the trick, for the moment when this kindness would be revealed as just another form of cruelty. But Nothing just kept reading his paper. Ruth kept cooking. Nobody spoke. After breakfast, Nothing stood. "Mugrat, I need to speak with you. Come with me." He led her out of the kitchen, through the house, and into a small study. Books lined the walls. A desk sat by the window. Nothing closed the door and turned to face her. "I know why nobody wanted to buy you," he said. Mugrat's heart hammered. She said nothing. "You killed a man," Nothing continued. 3 years ago, an overseer named Douglas Pritchard. You killed him with a shovel when he tried to assault a young girl. You were supposed to hang for it, but your owner at the time paid off the judge. Kept you alive because you were valuable property. But he also spread the word, made sure everyone knew. That's why you keep getting sold. That's why nobody bids on you." Mugrat lifted her chin. "If you know all that, why did you buy me?" "Because Douglas Pritchard was a monster," Nothing said quietly. "And you were brave enough to stop him. That takes strength, intelligence, courage. Those are qualities I need." "Need for what?" Nothing walked to his desk and pulled out a piece of paper. He handed it to Mugrat. It was a freedom document, blank, unsigned, but real. "I'm going to give you a choice," Nothing said. "You can leave right now. I'll sign this paper and you'll be free. You can go north, start a new life. Or you can stay here and help me with something dangerous, something that could get us both killed." Mugrat stared at the paper, at the word freedom written across the top. "What do you need help with?" she asked. Nothing met her eyes. I'm running an underground railroad station, helping enslaved people escape to the north. I need someone I can trust, someone who understands what's at stake, someone who won't break under pressure. Margaret's breath caught. You're risking your life, your property, everything. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, Nathaniel said simply. My father built this plantation on the backs of enslaved people. He died last year and left it all to me. I could keep running it the way he did, get rich, be comfortable, or I could try to fix some of the damage he caused. I chose to fix it. He gestured to the freedom paper. So what do you choose? Margaret looked at the paper in her hands. Freedom, right there, within reach. But she thought about the young girl she had saved, about all the people still suffering, about the chance to actually make a difference. She looked up at Nathaniel. If I stay, I want to know everything. I want to be part of the planning, not just a worker, a partner. Nathaniel smiled. It was the first time Margaret had seen him smile. Deal. Margaret folded the freedom paper and put it in her pocket. Then I'll stay, and I'll help you. But if you betray me, if this is some kind of trick, I will end you, just like I ended Douglas Pritchard. I believe you, Nathaniel said, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Over the next 2 weeks, Margaret learned the truth about Nathaniel Vance's plantation. It wasn't a plantation at all, not anymore. The fields were barely worked because there were only 3 people living there, Nathaniel, Ruth, and now Margaret. The other cabins stood empty. The barn held no animals. The whole place was a cover, a front to hide what was really happening. Ruth had been the first person Nathaniel freed when he inherited the property. She had stayed because she had nowhere else to go and because she believed in what Nathaniel was trying to do. She was the one who cooked for the people who came through, who tended their wounds, who gave them hope. We get runaways every few weeks, Ruth explained one evening as they prepared the cabin for new arrivals. Sometimes just one person, sometimes whole families. Mr. Vance has connections with conductors all along the route. They bring people here, we hide them, feed them, and then move them on to the next station. How does he avoid getting caught? Margaret asked. Carefully, Ruth said with a grim smile. He still plays the part when he needs to. Goes to town, talks like a proper plantation owner, complains about the war and the Yankees. Nobody suspects him. Why would they? He's white, wealthy, respectable. Margaret thought about that, about how Nathaniel used his privilege as a weapon against the very system that gave it to him. What about patrols? Margaret asked. Slave catchers. That's where you come in, Ruth said. She pulled back a rug in the corner of the cabin, revealing a trap door. We've got tunnels, 3 of them. They lead from different cabins to different exit points in the woods. If patrols come, we hide people down there. But we need someone watching, someone who can spot trouble before it arrives, someone smart. Margaret looked at the trap door, at the darkness below. You want me to be a lookout? I want you to be more than that, Ruth said. I'm getting old. My eyes aren't what they used to be. My hearing is going. We need someone younger, someone who can make quick decisions, someone who isn't afraid to fight if necessary. I can do that, Margaret said. I know, Ruth replied. That's why Mr. Vance bought you. 3 days later, the first group arrived. Margaret was in the kitchen when she heard the signal, 3 quick knocks, then 2 slow ones. Ruth nodded to her. Go get Mr. Vance. Tell him they're here. Margaret ran to the study where Nathaniel was working. They're here. He stood immediately. How many? I don't know yet. They went to the back entrance together. Nathaniel opened the door carefully. A black man stood there, about 30 years old, soaked through with sweat despite the cold. Behind him were 4 others, 2 women, 1 man, and a child who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Conductor Morrison, the man said, breathless. Coming from the Anderson plantation, we had trouble. Patrols are closer than usual. We need to move these people fast. Come in, Nathaniel said, quickly. The group filed inside. They looked terrified, exhausted. The little girl was crying silently, tears running down her face. Margaret felt something break open in her chest. She knew that fear. She had lived it. "Ruth, get them food and water," Nathaniel ordered. "Margaret, check the perimeter. Make sure nobody followed them." Margaret grabbed a shawl and went outside. The night was dark, clouds covering the moon. She moved quietly through the grounds, checking the tree line, listening for horses, for dogs, for anything that didn't belong. Nothing. She returned to the house. The group was in the kitchen, eating soup that Ruth had prepared. The little girl was still crying. Margaret knelt beside her. "What's your name, baby?" The girl looked at her with wide eyes. "Mary." "That's a beautiful name," Margaret said softly. "You're safe now, Mary. Nobody's going to hurt you here, I promise." The girl's mother, a woman who looked maybe 25, pulled Mary closer. "Is that true? Are we really safe?" Margaret looked at Nathaniel, who nodded. "You're safe," Margaret said. "We're going to help you get north, to freedom, but you have to trust us. Can you do that?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. Over the next hour, Nathaniel explained the plan. They would rest for 2 days, regain their strength. Then another conductor would come and take them to the next station, 50 miles north. From there, they would continue through a network of safe houses until they reached Pennsylvania. "What about patrols?" one of the men asked. "They're everywhere now. The wars made them paranoid." "That's why we're careful," Nathaniel said. "That's why we wait for the right moment. That's why we have people like Margaret watching." Everyone looked at Margaret. She saw the question in their eyes. Can we trust her? Is she really one of us? Margaret stood tall. "I killed a white man for trying to hurt a child," she said clearly. "I've been sold 3 times because of it. I'm here because I chose to fight, and I'll keep fighting until every single one of us is free." The room was silent. Then the mother of little Mary stood and walked to Margaret. She took Margaret's scarred hands in her own. "Thank you," she whispered. Margaret felt tears burn her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Thank you for being brave enough to run." The 2 days passed quickly. Margaret taught the group how to move silently through the woods, how to cover their tracks, how to recognize danger. Ruth made sure they ate well, building up their strength. Nathaniel gave them supplies, food, blankets, a little money. On the 3rd night, the next conductor arrived. A white woman named Elizabeth, dressed as a schoolteacher. She had a wagon with a false bottom where people could hide. "Ready?" she asked the group. They nodded. Mary's mother picked up her daughter. The others gathered their small bundles of belongings. Margaret walked them to the wagon, helped them climb inside the hidden compartment. It was cramped and dark, but it was the road to freedom. "Good luck," Margaret said. "Be strong." "We will," Mary's mother promised, "because of you." The wagon pulled away into the darkness. Margaret watched until she couldn't see it anymore. Nathaniel came to stand beside her. "You did well." "We're not done yet," Margaret said. "There will be more. There are always more." "Yes," Nathaniel agreed, "there are." Over the next 3 months, they helped 27 people escape. 27 souls who had been property became human beings with futures. But Margaret knew it couldn't last forever. One night in April, she was doing her perimeter check when she heard something. Voices, multiple horses coming fast. "Patrol!" She ran back to the house, burst through the door. Patrol coming, maybe 5 minutes out. Nathaniel's face went white. They had 7 people hiding in the barn. A family from Virginia who had arrived just 2 hours ago. "Get them to the tunnels," Nathaniel ordered, "now." Margaret and Ruth ran to the barn. The family was already awake, alert to danger even in sleep. "Follow me," Margaret said. "Don't make a sound." She led them to the cabin with the trap door, pulled it open. "Down quickly." The family climbed down into the darkness. Margaret could hear the horses now, getting closer. "Ruth, you go too," Margaret said. If they find you up here, they'll ask questions. What about you? I'll be fine, Margaret said. Go. Ruth hesitated, then climbed down. Margaret closed the trap door and covered it with the rug. She scattered some dirt on top, made it look undisturbed. Then she ran to the main house. Nathaniel was in his study looking at papers. He had changed into his expensive clothes, put on his owner's face. They're hidden, Margaret said. Good. Now you need to play your part. Margaret understood. She went to the kitchen and started washing dishes. When the patrol came, they would see exactly what they expected to see: a white man in his house and a black woman working. Invisible. The knock came hard and loud. Nathaniel opened the door. Evening, Mr. Vance, a rough voice said. We're looking for runaways. Got reports of suspicious activity in this area. Runaways? Nathaniel sounded surprised. I haven't seen anyone, but you're welcome to search the property. Margaret kept washing dishes, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. She heard boots on the wooden floors, heard men moving through the house, opening doors, checking rooms. One of them came into the kitchen, a tall man with a scar across his face. He looked at Margaret with disgust. You see any strangers around here? He demanded. No, sir, Margaret said, making her voice small and scared, playing the role. Just me and Mr. Vance, nobody else. The man grunted and moved on. They searched for 30 minutes, checked the barn, walked through the fields, but they didn't find the trap door, didn't find the tunnels. Finally, their leader came back to the house. Everything looks clear, Mr. Vance. Sorry to disturb you. No trouble at all, Nathaniel said smoothly. Anything to help maintain order. These are difficult times. That they are, the man agreed. You have a good night, sir. The patrol rode away. Margaret and Nathaniel waited in silence for 10 minutes, 20, making sure they were really gone. Finally, Nathaniel said, Go get them. Margaret opened the trap door. The family climbed out, shaking but unhurt. Ruth came up last. That was too close, Ruth said. I know, Nathaniel replied. They're getting more aggressive, more suspicious. We need to be even more careful. But Margaret saw something in his eyes that worried her. Not fear, something else. Doubt. 2 weeks after the patrol incident, things started to change. Nathaniel became distant. He stopped talking to Margaret about the plans, stopped including her in the decisions. He spent long hours in his study with the door locked. Ruth noticed too. Something's wrong, she said one morning. He's not himself. Maybe he's just scared, Margaret suggested. That patrol rattled all of us. No, Ruth said slowly. It's something else. I've known that boy since he was 10 years old. I know when he's hiding something. Margaret wanted to argue, but she couldn't, because she felt it too. The change, the distance. 3 days later, a man came to the plantation. He arrived in an expensive carriage, dressed like a gentleman. Nathaniel met him at the door and they went into the study together. Margaret was cleaning the hallway. She couldn't hear their words, but she could hear their tone. Anger, negotiation, something being decided. When the man left 2 hours later, his face was satisfied, smiling. Nathaniel's face was blank. That night, Margaret knocked on the study door. Come in, Nathaniel said. She entered to find him sitting at his desk, staring at nothing. He looked exhausted, old beyond his years. Who was that man? Margaret asked. A creditor, Nathaniel said quietly. My father left debts, more than I knew about. The plantation is mortgaged, the house, everything. If I don't pay, I lose it all. Margaret felt cold fear creep up her spine. How much do you owe? More than I can pay by running a fake plantation, Nathaniel said. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. My father spent money he didn't have to buy people he shouldn't have owned, and now his son has to figure out how to fix it. What are you going to do? Nathaniel looked at her, really looked at her. I don't know. That was when Margaret knew. Something bad was coming. She was right. The next group of runaways arrived 4 days later, 6 people from a plantation in North Carolina. They had walked for 2 weeks, hiding during the day, traveling at night. They were hungry, injured, desperate. Nathaniel greeted them at the door, but something was wrong. His movements were stiff. His eyes wouldn't meet theirs. "Come in," he said. "Rest, we'll take care of you." Ruth and Margaret fed them, bandaged their wounds, gave them clean clothes. The group relaxed. They thought they were safe. Margaret wanted to believe that too, but her instincts were screaming. She waited until everyone was asleep, then went to Nathaniel's study. Didn't knock, just walked in. He was sitting in the dark, a bottle of whiskey on the desk. "What did you do?" Margaret asked quietly. Nathaniel didn't answer. "What did you do, Nathaniel?" "I made a choice," he said. His voice was thick, drunk. "I made a terrible, necessary choice." Margaret felt her world tilt. "You sold them out." "I called the sheriff," Nathaniel said. He wouldn't look at her. "He's coming tomorrow. He'll arrest them, return them to their owners, and in exchange he's paying off my debts, enough to save the plantation." Margaret couldn't breathe, couldn't think. "You're lying, you wouldn't do that, you're not that person." "I'm exactly that person," Nathaniel said bitterly. "I'm my father's son. No matter how hard I tried to be different. When it came down to losing everything or selling out 6 people I've never met before, I chose myself." "They trusted you," Margaret whispered. "We all trusted you." "I know." Nathaniel finally looked at her. His eyes were red. "I'm sorry." "Sorry," Margaret's voice rose. "Sorry, those people are going to be tortured, killed, and you're sorry." "What else can I say?" Nathaniel stood up, swaying. "I'm weak. I'm a coward. I'm everything I said I wasn't, but at least I'm honest about it now." Margaret stared at him. At this man she had started to believe in, started to trust, and she realized Ruth had been right from the beginning. This was a strange place, but not in a good way. "Get out of my way," Margaret said. "Where are you going?" "To save them," Margaret said. "To do what you should have done, the right thing." She turned and walked out of the study, went to the cabin where the 6 runaways were sleeping, shook them awake. "Get up," she said urgently. "All of you now." A woman sat up, confused. "What's wrong?" "He betrayed us," Margaret said. "Nathaniel called the sheriff. They're coming in the morning. We have to get you out of here right now." The group was awake instantly, grabbing their few possessions. A young man looked at Margaret with fear. "Where do we go?" "I don't know," Margaret admitted, "but anywhere is safer than here." Ruth appeared in the doorway. She had heard everything. "Take them through the north tunnel. It comes out near the river. Follow it upstream for 3 miles. There's an old mill. A Quaker family lives there. They'll help." "How do you know?" Margaret asked. "Because I've been planning for this moment since the day I met Nathaniel Vance," Ruth said grimly. "I knew he might break. They all do eventually. Power corrupts, every single time." Margaret looked at the older woman with new respect. "Come with us." "No," Ruth said. "I'm too old to run, but you're not. Go, save these people. Be the hero I thought Nathaniel could be." Margaret hesitated, then she hugged Ruth quickly. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Ruth said. "Just survive." Margaret led the group out into the night. They moved quickly through the darkness, following the path Ruth had described. Margaret kept looking back, expecting to see torches, to hear dogs, to feel the horror of capture. But nothing came. They reached the tunnel entrance, a hollowed-out space beneath an old oak tree. Margaret ushered everyone inside. "Stay quiet," she whispered. "Stay together, I'll go first." The tunnel was narrow and dark. They crawled through dirt and roots, breathing hard, fighting panic, but they kept moving. After what felt like hours, they emerged on the other side. The river rushed nearby, silver in the moonlight. "Follow me," Margaret said. They walked along the riverbank, staying in the shadows. The young man who had spoken earlier came up beside Margaret. "Why are you helping us?" he asked. "You could have stayed, you could have saved yourself." "I spent my whole life watching people choose themselves over others," Margaret said. "Watching white people protect their wealth and comfort while we suffered. I'm done watching. I'm done accepting that as normal." "You're brave," the man said. "No," Margaret replied. "I'm just done being afraid." They walked for 3 hours. The night began to fade, gray light seeping across the sky. Margaret pushed them harder. They had to reach the mill before sunrise. Finally she saw it, an old stone building beside a waterfall. Smoke rose from the chimney. There, she breathed. They approached carefully. Margaret knocked on the door, 3 quick knocks. Then 2 slow ones, the signal. An elderly white man opened the door. He had kind eyes and work-worn hands. He looked at the group and nodded. "Friends of the friend," he said. "It was the password. Come in quickly." They stumbled inside. The man's wife was already preparing food, moving efficiently. She had done this before. "You'll stay here for 2 days," the man said. "Rest, eat, then we'll move you to the next station." The group collapsed onto benches, crying with relief. Margaret stood by the door watching the sunrise. She had done it. She had saved them. But she wasn't safe yet. Neither was Ruth. And Nathaniel had become the enemy. The Quaker man came to stand beside her. "You're not planning to stay, are you?" "No," Margaret said. "I have to go back." "That's suicide." "Maybe," Margaret agreed. "But I can't leave Ruth there alone. And I can't let Nathaniel get away with what he did. Someone has to make him answer for it." The man studied her face. "You're going to kill him." "I'm going to give him a choice," Margaret said. "The same choice he gave those people, his life or his conscience." "That's still murder." Margaret looked at him. "I killed a man before, an overseer who hurt children. I'd do it again. Some people need to be stopped. And if the law won't stop them, then someone else has to." The Quaker man sighed. "I can't condone violence." "I'm not asking you to," Margaret said. "I'm asking you to save these 6 people. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said quietly, "I can do that." "Then that's enough." Margaret left as the sun rose fully over the horizon. She walked back along the river, back through the tunnel, back to the plantation. Back to face the man who had betrayed everything he claimed to believe. Margaret reached the plantation just as the sheriff's carriage was pulling away. She hid in the tree line and watched. The sheriff and 2 deputies looked angry, frustrated. They gestured at the empty cabin, clearly searching for the runaways who weren't there. Nathaniel stood on the porch, his face pale. He was talking fast, making excuses. The sheriff wasn't buying it. After 10 minutes of heated conversation, the sheriff got back in his carriage and left. But his final words carried across the yard. "You better find them, Vance, or you'll pay me what you owe another way." The carriage disappeared down the road. Nathaniel stood alone on the porch, head in his hands. Margaret waited until she was sure the sheriff was really gone. Then she walked out of the trees. Nathaniel saw her and froze. "Margaret." "Where's Ruth?" Margaret asked. "Inside, she's fine. I didn't tell them about her." "How generous of you." Nathaniel flinched at the sarcasm. "I deserve that." "You deserve a lot worse," Margaret said. She climbed the porch steps slowly. "You sold out 6 innocent people. You betrayed everything you claimed to stand for money." "To save the plantation," Nathaniel said desperately. "To keep helping others." "Don't," Margaret's voice cut like a knife. "Don't you dare justify this. You chose yourself, your comfort, your property, just like every other slave owner in this God-forsaken country." Nathaniel's face crumpled. "You're right. God help me, you're right. I'm a coward. I'm worse than my father because at least he never pretended to be anything different." "Where does that leave us?" Margaret asked quietly. "I don't know," Nathaniel whispered. "I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix it," Margaret said. "Those people will never trust you again. I will never trust you again. You showed us who you really are when it mattered most." She reached into her pocket and pulled out the freedom paper he had given her months ago, the one she had kept folded close to her heart, the one that represented hope. She tore it in half. Nathaniel's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" "I don't want freedom from you," Margaret said. "I don't want anything from you, because anything you give me you can take away. Just like you tried to take away those people's freedom, I'm taking my freedom myself." "The sheriff will hunt you," Nathaniel said. "When he finds out I don't have the runaways, he'll assume you helped them. He'll put a bounty on your head." "Let him," Margaret said. "I've been hunted before. I've been sold before. I've survived worse than anything he can do to me." She turned to leave. "Wait," Nathaniel said. "Please, let me help. I have money hidden, supplies. I can get you to the next station. It's the least I can do." Margaret looked back at him. This broken man who had almost been something better, almost been a hero. "The least you can do," she said slowly, "is stay out of my way." She walked into the house and found Ruth in the kitchen, packing supplies into a bag. The older woman looked up. "You came back," Ruth said. "I couldn't leave you." "Foolish girl," Ruth said, but there was warmth in her voice. "I told you to run." "And I told you I was done watching people suffer while I did nothing," Margaret replied. She started helping Ruth pack. "We're leaving, both of us, right now." "Where will we go?" "North," Margaret said. "All the way to freedom, and then we're coming back." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Coming back?" "Someone has to keep fighting," Margaret said. "Someone has to help the people still trapped in this system. Nathaniel was too weak to do it, but we're not." A smile crossed Ruth's face. "No, we're not." They packed quickly, food, blankets, money that Ruth had been hiding for years, documents that might prove useful. As they worked, Nathaniel stood in the doorway watching. "I'm sorry," he said again, "for everything." Margaret paused. She wanted to stay angry, wanted to hate him, but she saw the genuine remorse in his eyes, the understanding of what he had lost. "Sorry doesn't change anything," she said, "but maybe it's a start. Maybe you can be better, do better, actually help people instead of just pretending." "How?" Nathaniel asked desperately. "How do I fix this?" Margaret thought for a moment. "The plantation is worthless to you now, right? The sheriff won't pay your debts because you don't have the runaways. You can't work the fields because you don't have workers. It's just a big empty piece of land." "Yes," Nathaniel said bitterly, "it's all for nothing." "Then sell it," Margaret said. "Sell the plantation. Take whatever money you get and use it to actually help the Underground Railroad. Not by hiding people here where you can betray them, by funding real safe houses, real conductors, people who won't break." She stepped closer to him. "Use your privilege for something good, not performatively, not when it's convenient, but actually, consistently, even when it costs you everything." Nathaniel stared at her. "You're right." "I know I'm right," Margaret said. "The question is whether you're strong enough to do it." "I don't know if I am." "Then figure it out," Margaret said. "Because the world doesn't need more weak men making excuses. It needs people who will actually fight for what's right." She picked up her bag. Ruth did the same. They walked out of the house together, two black women with nothing but their courage and each other. Nathaniel called after them. "Where will you go?" "Wherever we're needed," Margaret called back. "Which is everywhere." They disappeared into the woods, following the path north. Behind them, they heard Nathaniel sit down on the porch steps, heard him finally break, finally cry for what he had done, for what he had become. But Margaret didn't look back. She kept her eyes forward, on the future, on freedom. "Do you really think he'll change?" Ruth asked as they walked. "I don't know," Margaret admitted, "but I gave him a chance. What he does with it is up to him." "And us?" Ruth asked. "What do we do?" Margaret thought about the 6 people they had saved, about the countless others still waiting for help, still praying for freedom. We keep fighting, she said. We find the real underground railroad, the real freedom fighters, and we become the people we needed Nathaniel to be. That's dangerous, Ruth said. Everything worth doing is dangerous, Margaret replied. They walked for 3 days following Ruth's memory of old routes and safe houses. They slept in the woods, ate wild berries, drank from streams. It was hard, exhausting, terrifying. But they were free. On the 4th day, they reached a small town in Maryland. Ruth knew of a Quaker meeting house there, a real safe house, run by people who had been helping runaways for decades. They knocked on the door, 3 quick knocks, then 2 slow ones. An elderly black woman answered. She looked at them and smiled. "Friends of the friend." "Friends of the friend," Margaret confirmed. "Come in," the woman said. "You're safe here. My name is Harriet." Margaret and Ruth stepped inside. The house was warm and full of people, other runaways, other freedom seekers, other survivors. "We want to help," Margaret said. "We want to be part of this fight." Harriet studied them, saw the scars, the strength, the determination. "We can always use more soldiers," she said. "Welcome to the war." Margaret felt something settle in her chest, purpose, direction, hope. She had started this journey on an auction block, worth nothing to anyone, rejected, discarded, invisible. But now she was part of something bigger, part of a movement that would change the world. And she would never be invisible again. 2 years passed. Margaret became one of the most effective conductors on the Underground Railroad. She made 19 trips south, bringing back over 300 people to freedom. She learned to move like a ghost, to plan like a general, to fight like a soldier. She was fearless because she had nothing left to lose. Ruth stayed at the Maryland Safe House, coordinating the network, managing supplies, teaching new conductors. She became the heart of the operation, the one who held everything together. They heard nothing from Nathaniel Vance for the first year. Then, slowly, rumors started to reach them. A wealthy white man in Georgia was funding safe houses, paying conductors, using his money and connections to help enslaved people escape. He never took credit, never sought recognition, just quietly worked behind the scenes. "Do you think it's him?" Ruth asked one evening. "I hope so," Margaret said. "I really hope so." In the spring of 1864, Margaret was planning her 20th trip south when she received a message. It was hand-delivered by a young conductor she had trained. "This came from Georgia," he said, "from someone named Vance." Margaret opened the letter, Nathaniel's handwriting. Margaret asterisk. "I sold the plantation, every acre, every building. I used the money to establish 3 permanent safe houses and to fund 5 full-time conductors. I will never own another human being. I will never profit from their suffering. I know this doesn't erase what I did. I know I can never earn your forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that you changed my life. You showed me what real courage looks like. There is a plantation in southern Georgia, the Whitfield Estate. They are the cruelest owners in the state. Over 200 people are enslaved there with no hope of escape. The owner is dying. When he dies, his son plans to sell everyone, to separate families, to destroy what little they have left. I'm writing to you because I think we can save them, all of them, but it will take careful planning, resources, and someone brave enough to walk into hell and bring people out. I think you're that person. If you're willing, meet me in Savannah on May 15th. I'll explain everything. Nathaniel Vance. Margaret read the letter 3 times, then she showed it to Ruth. "What do you think?" Margaret asked. "I think 200 people need saving," Ruth said, "and I think you're the only one who can do it." "It could be a trap." "It could be," Ruth agreed, "or it could be a man trying to finally do something right." Margaret thought about the Nathaniel she had known, the one who had betrayed 6 people to save his property, and the Nathaniel who might have become something better. I'll go, she decided, but not alone. I'm taking 3 of our best conductors with me. Good, Ruth said. And Margaret, be careful. Whatever this plan is, it's going to be dangerous. Everything we do is dangerous, Margaret replied with a small smile. That's what makes it worth doing. She arrived in Savannah on May 14th, one day early. She watched the meeting place, a small church on the edge of town, for hours before Nathaniel appeared. He looked different, older, thinner. His expensive clothes were gone, replaced by simple working man's attire. He walked with less confidence, more humility. He had changed. Margaret stepped out of the shadows. "Hello, Nathaniel." He turned and his face broke into a genuine smile. "You came." "I came for the 200 people," Margaret said, "not for you." "I know," Nathaniel said. "Come inside, let me explain." They went into the church. Nathaniel spread maps across a table. "The Whitfield Plantation is here, 30 miles south. The owner, Harrison Whitfield, is dying of consumption. He has maybe 3 months to live. His son Thomas is already making plans to liquidate the estate." "Which means selling the people," Margaret said. "Exactly. They'll be sold individually. Families will be separated, children taken from parents, husbands from wives. It will destroy them." "How do you know all this?" Nathaniel met her eyes. "Because I've been working as a laborer on the plantation for 6 months, gathering information, earning trust, learning the layout." Margaret was stunned. "You've been working there?" "In the fields," Nathaniel said, "doing manual labor, living in the white workers' quarters. Nobody knows who I really am. To them, I'm just Nathan Vance, a poor white man who needs work." "Why would you do that?" "Because you told me to use my privilege for something good," Nathaniel said quietly. "White overseers talk freely around white workers. They don't guard their words. I've learned things, schedules, security, weaknesses." He pointed to the map. "There's a way to do this, to get everyone out in one night, but it requires perfect timing and resources I don't have." "What resources?" "Wagons," Nathaniel said. "At least 15, and drivers who can move them fast, and a place to hide 200 people while we move them north in stages." Margaret studied the map. Her mind was already racing, planning, calculating. "I can get the wagons," she said. "The Quakers have been helping us. They have resources, and I know safe houses along the route, but this is ambitious, bigger than anything we've done before." "I know," Nathaniel said. "That's why I needed you. You're the only one I know who could pull this off." Margaret looked at him. "If this works, it will be the biggest escape in the history of the Underground Railroad. If it fails, everyone involved will die. Are you prepared for that?" "I've been preparing for 2 years," Nathaniel said. "Ever since you walked away from me, I've been trying to become the person you thought I could be." "I never thought you could be anyone," Margaret said. "I hoped, but I didn't believe." "Then let me prove you wrong," Nathaniel said. "Let me help you save 200 people." Margaret thought about it, about the risk, about the potential, about the lives hanging in the balance. "All right," she said. "I'm in, but I lead this operation. You follow my orders, no arguments, no hesitation. You do exactly what I say when I say it." "Agreed," Nathaniel said immediately. "And if you betray us again," Margaret continued, her voice hard as iron, "I will kill you myself. Do you understand?" "I understand," Nathaniel said, "and I wouldn't blame you." They spent the next 3 weeks planning. Margaret brought in her most trusted conductors. They studied the maps, the schedules, the patrol routes. They identified every possible risk and planned for it. The Quaker network provided 15 wagons and 30 drivers. Safe houses along the route prepared to receive groups of 20 at a time. Money was raised for supplies, bribes, and contingencies. On June 10th, they were ready. Margaret and her team positioned themselves in the woods surrounding the Whitfield plantation. They waited until midnight, when the guards were tired and less vigilant. Nathaniel, still working as a laborer, had been preparing the enslaved people, quietly passing messages, building trust, explaining that liberation was coming. At exactly midnight, Margaret gave the signal. Nathaniel moved through the quarters, waking people, telling them it was time. "Take nothing," he whispered. "Just yourselves, just your children. Freedom is waiting." 200 people began moving in the darkness, women carrying bobbies, men holding the hands of children, elderly people helped by younger ones, all of them silent, all of them terrified, all of them hopping. They moved to the edge of the plantation where the wagons waited. Margaret and her conductors helped people climb aboard, covering them with hay and blankets. It was going perfectly. Too perfectly. Then a gunshot rang out. One of the guards had seen movement. He fired into the air, sounding the alarm. "Go," Margaret shouted. "All wagons go now." The drivers snapped their reins. The wagons lurched forward, heading for different routes north. Margaret had planned for this. No single caravan that could be stopped. Multiple paths, multiple destinations. But some people were still in the quarters, still trying to reach the wagons. Margaret ran toward them. "This way, run." Nathaniel appeared beside her, helping an elderly woman who had fallen. "Go," he told Margaret, "get them out." "What about you?" "I'll hold them off," Nathaniel said. "I'll give you time." "You'll die," Margaret said. "Maybe," Nathaniel said, "but 200 people will live. That's a good trade." Before Margaret could argue, Nathaniel ran toward the main house. He started shouting, drawing attention away from the fleeing wagons. Margaret saw guards running toward him. She wanted to help him, wanted to save him. But she had 60 people still counting on her. She made the choice, the hard choice, the choice a leader makes. She kept moving forward. The next hour was chaos. They ran through the woods, following paths Margaret had scouted. Behind them, they heard shouting, gunfire, the sounds of pursuit. But the wagons were fast, and the conductors knew the terrain. By sunrise, they had reached the first safe house. 37 people, exhausted but alive. Over the next week, reports came in. All 15 wagons had made it to their destinations. 193 people had been saved. 7 had been recaptured, the price of freedom. And Nathaniel Vance had been arrested. He was being held in the Savannah jail, charged with inciting a slave rebellion, a crime punishable by death. Ruth brought Margaret the news. "He's going to hang. The trial is a formality. They'll convict him in a day." Margaret sat in silence for a long time. Then she said, "We have to break him out." "Are you insane?" Ruth asked. "He made his choice. He knew the risks." "He saved 200 people," Margaret said. "He gave everything to make up for his mistakes. I can't let him die for that." "Margaret," Ruth said gently, "you can't save everyone." "Maybe not," Margaret agreed, "but I can save him." She took 2 conductors and headed south. They reached Savannah 4 days before the scheduled execution. The jail was heavily guarded. Getting in seemed impossible. But Margaret had learned something in her years as a conductor. Nothing was impossible. You just had to be willing to pay the price. She bribed a guard with money from the Quaker Fund, convinced him that Nathaniel was actually a Union spy who needed to escape. It wasn't entirely a lie. The night before the execution, the guard opened Nathaniel's cell. Margaret was waiting in the shadows. Time to go. Nathaniel looked at her in shock. "What are you doing here?" "Saving you," Margaret said. "Just like you saved 200 people. Now move." They escaped through a side door into a waiting wagon. They drove north through the night. Nathaniel was silent for hours. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you come back for me?" "Because you became the person I hoped you could be," Margaret said. "And the world needs more people like that. I still don't deserve your forgiveness." "Maybe not," Margaret said, "but you've earned something better, a second chance." They made it to Maryland. to the safe house where Ruth was waiting. "You're both fools," Ruth said, but she was smiling. "Brave, beautiful fools." Nathaniel stayed with the Underground Railroad network for the rest of the war. He became one of their most valuable assets, a white man who could move freely, gather intelligence, and use his privilege as a weapon against the institution that had given it to him. Margaret continued her work as a conductor. By the time the war ended and slavery was abolished, she had personally helped over 500 people reach freedom. After the war, she and Nathaniel founded a school for formerly enslaved children in Georgia. They taught them to read and write, taught them their history, taught them that they mattered. On the first day of school, Margaret stood in front of 30 children and told them a story. "Once upon a time," she said, "there was a man named Jabari Mansa. He was enslaved, but he never stopped teaching, never stopped fighting, never stopped believing that one day his people would be free." She showed them a journal, a copy of the one Sarah Henderson had found decades later, a copy that Margaret had discovered in her own research. "His story lived," Margaret said, "because people like him refused to be erased, and now your stories will live too, because you are the future. You are the proof that resistance wins, that courage matters, that freedom is worth any price." The children stared at her with wide eyes. "Who will tell our stories?" a small girl asked. Margaret smiled. "You will, and then your children will, and then their children, until the truth is so loud, so clear, so undeniable that no one can ever bury it again." She looked at Nathaniel, who was standing at the back of the classroom. He nodded. They had both started this journey as broken people. One had been sold on an auction block for $10. The other had betrayed everything he believed in. But they had found redemption, not through grand gestures or easy answers, but through hard work, through sacrifice, through the daily choice to do better, to be better. Margaret thought back to that cold day in Charleston, to standing on that auction block while men looked through her like she was nothing. They had been wrong. She was everything. She was courage, she was strength, she was the future. And her story would live forever.